Hey guys, John here, and welcome back to 100 Sound Design Tips. This is video 17, and in today's video, we're going to step a little bit away from the music side and kind of talk a little bit more about sound effects, environments, and kind of recreating things that are more so sound-based, not necessarily musical-based. And this is really cool because here is where we can really hone our skills and kind of look and listen to things in the real world and kind of understand how we can apply things into synthesis. So a while ago in my Discord, if you haven't joined, you should. We hang out. We have a good time there. You should join. Somebody asked, how do I recreate a rocket taking off? And I thought about that for a second. Like, that's an interesting challenge there. Because, okay, one, how do we perceive a rocket taking off? For the most part, we will see a video of someone filming it and the rocket kind of takes off into the sky, whatever, right? That's kind of how we hear it. Most of us aren't lucky enough to see it live, right? That would probably be a whole cool experience. But for the most of us and most people listening are probably going to understand that more through some type of digital medium, right? So what do we have in there? We have some type of like rumble. We might have some type of like mechanical sounds. We might have to, when the rocket takes off, we're going to have to kind of cut the high frequencies. For the most part, since it's so loud, it's going to distort people's phones once they record it. So we're going to have to maybe simulate that or maybe put that on a certain macro. So those are kind of the core components. So with that, I was like, let's see how far we can get. So let's see how far we can get for this one. So let's go to Menu, Initialize. And for this, we have our saw wave as we normally start off with. And we think to ourselves, okay, we don't want musical. We don't want a saw wave for now. We could incorporate that maybe. But now let's dip this out, this gain here, and let's add some noise. Now that's a little bit too high pitched for a rocket. So let's kind of bring this down with right click. Let's bring the color down. Maybe something like that. And the envelope is not realistic at all. It's not going to just cut off instantly, so we need to increase the release quite a bit. Have something like that. Maybe a little bit of attack just to kind of smooth it out. Okay, we're kind of getting somewhere. And now we want to do something maybe, okay, once the rocket's taking off, we need a way to control the frequencies going away as well as a couple other things. So this first macro here is basically its job is to simulate the motion of the rocket leaving us. And there's a couple of parameters we're going to need to tie to this. So the first one is going to be obviously the frequencies, right? As something moves away from you, the higher frequencies are going to go away. So we're going to need to simulate something like that. So maybe for this cutoff knob, we can have it pretty low. And for macro 1, let's drag and drop this here. And let's bring this all the way to the top and then make this on percent and give it 100. So as we drag this macro down, that's going to be the rocket taking off. I mean, you could do the opposite when it going up, but this makes more sense to me because we're kind of closing something. Okay, so we have that. And generally with this kind of sound, there might be like wind kind of moving things around, and the frequencies will change a little bit depending on your perspective. So I thought, okay, let's get an LFO and let's drag and drop this here on the cutoff as well. But for this guy, we want to do something random. We want to take it off sync, right? We want this to be free, maybe slow this down quite a bit. And then we don't want this triggered every single time. So maybe on free. So it's just kind of random wherever it starts. And then we also need to give it some depth. So maybe something small like 3. It's subtle, but if we increase the rate here, we would hear that like flutter, and maybe that might be cool. Maybe you can also put this on a macro like disturbance speed or something like that. That's another thing to think about. But for now, we can bring this a little bit slower. That might be kind of cool. It's a very subtle effect here. So with that being said, what else do we need to add? Okay, if we're at this place, there's rockets, there's probably going to be other people there. And there's probably going to be more mechanical sounds than just wind. So for that, let's add another oscillator and also bring this gain all the way down. And depending on the synth you have, you might have different samples, different sounds. You might be able to bring stuff in. That might be kind of cool. But if you have Avenger, there's a lot of cool samples here for noise. So if we went to our category here, we can go down to organic noises. And if you haven't gone through this menu, there's a lot of cool stuff to go through. So spend some time in this menu. And I found that these beam noises here are very useful for that. So let's say beam 1, for example. Let's mute the first one. And it almost sounds like kind of here, if it's really high up, maybe like some mechanical machinery, helicopter. But as we bring this down, It almost sounds like some engine or something like that, or something that's continuously moving, which maybe we want to incorporate that. And together with both of these, it can sound kind of cool. And since they're both going to the same filter, it's going to sound like it's getting taken off, or the rocket's taken off once it leaves. So if we're in a big open space, we might want to add some big reverb. So maybe down over here, we can add something like a root-averb and bring this up. Because we want to have a lot of that extraness, extra room and environment as we bring the filter down. Right, we're kind of simulating something like that. And maybe for this case as well, maybe we can add some resonance to give it some swooshing sound kind of moving through the wind here. Because sometimes if you tell someone like, okay, what does a plane sound like or something really fast, they'll be like, you know, that's basically telling you there's resonance on it. And that might be nice to add. So here in this case, we're doing like 7, almost 8%. We can fiddle with that setting if we want to. So we have that. That's kind of cool. Now we have our wind. We have some type of mechanical noise. And then we should add something else, right? So let's bring this down. And what other noises do we have? What other things would be out there? Maybe other people. Maybe there would be like other cars, or I don't know, maybe other types of vehicles that would help bring supplies or move things around. I don't know. I'm just trying to think outside the box. What else would we have in that environment? So if we brought this up and kind of changed our filter here, let's go through our noises, and we have stuff like maybe crowd 1, crowd 2. So is there people there? Let's check it out. So let's mute these ones. This could be cool. It sounds more like a crowd that's cheering. So maybe we could incorporate something like this. Like once the rocket takes off, we can have another macro, like turn the crowd on, people are applauding, and we can go that deep if we want to. Let's check out the other ones. Seems kind of similar, right? So people could be cheering, they're happy about something, but maybe we can go down that path. But I found here in the organic noises, this city one is actually pretty useful because we have almost like voices in the background that we can't really discern what they're saying. We have maybe cars driving by, the sound of a city, obviously, because of the name. So that could be really useful. What if we just kind of duct this down as far as frequency goes with this filter in here, the noise color? That might be kind of cool, and maybe brought this down a little bit and incorporated everything else into it. Okay, so now we have some of the elements. So let's kind of name some of these. So for the first one that we can go for, like, let's call it noise. And then the second one, what do we have here? This beam, so maybe mechanical. And then the third one could be something like environment. Env, I guess we can call that. It might be confusing for envelope, but whatever. So now we kind of need to balance these out a little bit, because they're kind of, we have the pieces, but they're not really layered correctly. So first thing, if we have this noise, we want to beef this up a little bit. So let's go to EQ. And we want something kind of wide like that, like kind of pushing that low end. So once we dip this filter down, that's going to be kind of cool. Okay, so we have that. Now, let's say now we want to unmute this mechanical. Now that's way overpowering the actual like wind or the sound of the rocket, because this sound is probably a little bit less impactful. So let's duck this a little bit. That might be okay. It's kind of buried, and that's kind of the idea for that. And then this envelope one here. So this, I fooled myself. Okay, environment. Jesus. Maybe this could be a little bit more dipped as well. And we have the filter or the noise color a little bit past this this white strip here. So this could be kind of cool, and let's maybe label this macro knob takeoff or something. Okay. We have that one guy kind of screaming in there. Let's bring this down just a little bit more. Okay, so we have this, and at this point, this filter sounds cool, so maybe you want to experiment a little bit. And if you're ever doing things that are more so organic, right, like environmental stuff, and you kind of just need to like shave things off here and there, the low pass 1 pole is a great one to use because it's very gentle and it sounds more natural. Right? It doesn't necessarily sound to me like, okay, now we have a filter and we're filtering stuff on. It just kind of sounds like a natural, like, okay, we're just losing high frequency content, but it does, I almost don't hear the filter, if that makes any sort of sense. Okay. At this point, let's get some coffee at least first. At this point, we have our noise, we have our mechanical stuff, we have our environment. What are we missing here? And the key aspect is, like I said in the beginning, if we're watching this from somewhere, most people record this and we see it through their recording. So there's going to be that distortion. So that's a crucial point that we need to add. Now we think, okay, where do we put this distortion? Should it be before the reverb? Should it be after the reverb? And in this case, if we're trying to simulate the reality of it, the people they're listening to it, it's not going to distort their ears, so to speak, right? It's going to distort their phone. So there's this situation happening, this rocket's kind of leaving, and then someone is filming it and the phone itself is getting distorted. So there's the reverb, there's the effects, all this stuff. And at the very end comes the reverb. So we should put this after the reverb. So a good one here we could do is, for example, I like the multiband distortion because this gives us the opportunity to kind of pick the band of frequencies that we want to distort. Now, while they're all pretty much cool, really the low end distortion is going to sell this effect here. So here's without distortion. We have our pieces there, and we can maybe even bring the mechanical down a little bit more and the environment, something like that. Okay. And maybe on the noise itself, that might be a little bit better, and the environment is bringing that a little bit more. Maybe duck it out for frequencies. Okay, that's a pretty decent start here. Now this low end, right? If we start cranking this up, right there, it almost kind of has that that effect of like someone's filming something, there's this rocket, whatever rocket does, and it's leaving, and this distortion is helping sell that illusion. Right, let's start it off. We're not going to go like reverse, right? We're not SpaceX yet. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if this is it the city one that's doing that. Maybe let's duck this a little bit more. That might make more sense. Okay. So we have our distortion here, and if we take this low one off and maybe add the mid, it's okay, but it doesn't really sell it too much. We can add some of it, sure. Let's check out the highs. Maybe, but it's really the low end that really sells this. Let's check that all out again with all of our stuff together here. So let's bring all of these distortions down so you kind of see what I'm talking about. So the mid. Okay. The high is okay. But really the low. And then maybe you want to like drag this over a little bit to get that sound. And this is here a choice you're going to have to make. So if we do want this distortion, that might be kind of cool to have. And maybe we don't want it. Maybe we want somebody else who uses this patch to put their own distortion or whatever it is on it. So in this case, if I were to design this patch for somebody else, I would give them the opportunity to do that. So I would probably find a good spot here. And I would say, okay, maybe this is a good value. Now, we have a couple options. How do we want to deliver this to someone? And this is an important spot as well, because you have to also think of how you would use this or how somebody else would use this. Should we put the distortion on a slider so they can control the amount? That might be kind of nice. Should we put it on a button so they can just toggle the distortion on and off? That also might be nice. If I were to use this, I might think maybe this distortion is too much or not enough. So I would probably give the user that option. So for macro 2, I would label this as distortion. And we would use this guy maybe on this low, because I don't really care to use the high in the mids on this because it doesn't really matter too much. So we could put it on like the mix, but then again, if we did that, then it would just be like, this is a set value of distortion. You're just choosing how much of that value that you want, if that makes any sense. I would leave this mix at 100, maybe put this on a macro, maybe. But for this low distortion, I would probably just use this knob here and give it something in the mod matrix like 55 maybe, and maybe put this on plus. So once you go this all the way to the top, this value reflects 55. So now we can remove this entirely and just let the user have as much distortion as they want to. Okay. So we have a couple of cool spots here. So we have our different noise, we have our noise, the mechanical stuff, maybe a little bit of people in an environment as well. We have some reverb, we're distorting that reverb. We have all this on a macro. Now there's one key component that we're probably missing. So if we think of this in a couple different ways, we can think, okay, this environment, that is where potentially we are going to be at. The noise and this mechanical is part of that rocket that's taking off. So that's going to leave us and that's going to get quieter as the distance increases. So with that being said, how do we want to structure this? Maybe we want to have the environment stay with us, maybe not. There's some spots in sound design where it is helpful to be realistic in the sense, but sometimes it's even better to kind of break that illusion a little bit and just do something that's technically not possible, but it sounds good, right? So for example, we can do this in the sense that we can use this amp volume, because they're all going to this first amp. We can use this as like the distance separator. So if we brought this down here all the way to the bottom, we don't have any sound, right? Because the amp is down. So in this case, what we could do is use this macro as well on this guy. So as this goes all the way down, then also the volume goes down as well. So as this turns down, the volume goes all the way down to 0. But maybe we don't want exactly 0 because it's going to be completely silent. Maybe you want to bring this its lowest to maybe like 14, like that or something, or 11. And then once this is all the way up, we can decide, okay, at the top, how much volume do we want in the beginning? Maybe at the center where it already was. Maybe right there. So now we're in a spot 2. Let's add a little bit more distortion. And we're sitting in the spot. We're looking at this rocket taking off. And let's kind of try to simulate that. And it generally happens pretty slow. Okay, we're getting closer. I maybe want to have a little bit more high frequencies in the actual noise itself to be able to be distorted. So in that case, we can go here, and that's what's nice about having this almost like an atomized control with this filter on the noise itself. So we open up the noise, and then at full distortion, and then try it again. Might be kind of cool. And let's maybe try out noise stereo. How would that sound? I think even in this case, we could probably add a little bit more distortion. So here in our mod matrix, let's do something crazy like 75. So it's really distorting, and kind of maybe dial that back and kind of see where that leads us. And maybe a little bit more resonance. Okay. Right, kind of a cool spot here. So what else can we add to this? So I think in my when I'm listening to this, maybe a little bit more low end oomph on the very end. So that's what's cool about the master effects. So we can bring out an EQ, and then we can maybe see how we can dial this in a little bit more realistic wise. And remember, in this case, how we do in music, right? So different patches, we'll cut out some like ugly frequencies and kind of like really trying to tailor it there too. We can do that to some extent, but a rocket, it doesn't care about an EQ. It's just loud and crazy. Right, so let's try this again here. We're sitting at this area. We're about to see this rocket take off. And it kind of works kind of cool. What if we want to try a different filter? That's also a possibility. Or we could use drive as well. That's another option too. So let's go for a gentler one like we have in the beginning. So like a low pass 12 again. Let's see how that sounds here. And I think the resonance might be a little bit much. We'll see. Could do that too. It's up to you. I think the one pull is a little bit better, but let's bring up our drive, see what that would sound like. And then once that's down, you kind of let go of the key, and then it just, the reverb and everything takes care of that as well. Right, you kind of get that kind of cool sound. Now let's think to ourselves, what else could be maybe give to the user? And in that sense, maybe we can do something with this pan. Right, so if we had this pan all the way to the right, we can now simulate the position a little bit more as well as the volume. So if we wanted to use this patch, how would we control that? How would we let the user define where the rocket's going to go? Now, there's a couple different ways. We could use a macro here that is basically position. So we could say, when this is here at noon at like 50%, this is panning straight up and down. And then we use this macro to kind of move this around the stereo field. That's also an option. We could hard code it in the sense that the rocket always starts a little bit to the right, and as we use the takeoff one, then it moves to the left. That could be an option too, but maybe that's not what's happening on like the film or whatever you're trying to do. Maybe it's better to have more controls, but a little bit more specialized. And that's a decision you'll probably have to make at some point. And in this case, I think that's the right way to go. So if we drag and drop this macro onto pan, and then for this guy, we can say, let's bring this all the way to our left and bring this all the way to our left. And then for our macro 3, 100% here. So as we move this, it's going to move with it as well. So that's kind of cool in and of itself. And we can label this as maybe like X, Y. No, that'd be kind of confusing. Let's just put position. That would be kind of interesting there. It could be something like a plane flying by, or like a, depending on how you use the macros, it's very flexible in that sense. And this is the cool part about just sound design in itself. You can kind of like simulate what's going on and how you would create things in the real world, but also kind of break them a little bit as well. Because in this case, this environment noise is like the people cheering, and that's also getting applied to this amp, which is leaving. So it's kind of like the people in this environment are on that rocket and they're kind of taken off, which is totally unrealistic. But we can do that, or we can separate this out to a different effect stack and leave them there. And the rocket stays and the people stay. You could do that too. So here from the beginning, let's say we're starting from the right or something. And then there you go. And maybe in this case, where this is at here, maybe I want to have it a little bit higher up so the amp should not close completely, but maybe like 20 something percent. So in this case, okay, maybe more resonance as well in this guy. But that's essentially this kind of process. And then maybe in this case, maybe the environment, I'll mute that one for now. You have that. Also, a thing to think about too as well, the filter all the way up like this, maybe that's not something you want to start off with here at the top. So this macro one, this takeoff, the filter one cutoff, maybe you can bring this down a little bit like that. So it kind of goes like this here, or bring that down a little bit more. That's another option as well. So yeah, hopefully you learned something from this type of thing. Maybe we can do some more types of environment patches like this. These are probably one of the most fun because it really gets you creatively thinking and what's out there in the real world. How do you apply like a volume contour? What kind of filtering are you going to use? The modulation sources, how are you going to EQ it? The effects that you have on there, that's a whole another can of worms. And I feel like doing things like this can really help you become a better sound designer. So once you're at a point like, I have to make a bass, you're like, oh, that's easy. I just made a rocket taking off a bass is no problem, right? So that's kind of the idea. So yeah, hopefully you learned something. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.